Welcome, GEW Fort Worth, to Funding Options for Your New Venture. It is a pleasure to be here to explore the wide world of funding options as new ventures, whether you're lifestyle or high growth or launching, because there are some for all and some for very specific ventures. And I have a pleasure of having two fantastic founders joining me today for this discussion. But before we start, big thank you to UTA and the Center for Entrepreneurship and Economic Innovation for helping us put on this subject and presenting it to the greater Fort Worth community and beyond. And hopefully this has some lasting power as far as the insights from real world entrepreneurs that are looking at these funding sources and have pursued these. And a big thank you for Dell Technologies for supporting GEW Fort Worth this year. So my name is Hayden Blackburn. I'm the Executive Director of Tech Fort Worth, a nonprofit entrepreneur support organization helping technology entrepreneurs in high growth ventures to launch and scale their ventures. And I also get the pleasure of wearing the hat of Director of Cowtown Angels and bring the Angels per point of view to some of this conversation. And so we're going to be talking non-dilutive and dilutive sources, and we'll define what that actually means if that's the first time you've ever heard that vocabulary. There will be terminology along this way, and we'll do our best to not hit you with a bunch of acronyms and always define those first. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our two panelists that are joining live from the electric vehicle of the future is Edward Morgan. Edward, welcome. Introduction and share us a little bit about your company.
Great. Hey, thank you for the opportunity to be a panelist. I'm Edward Morgan. I am the founder of Revitalize Charging Solutions, and we're based in Fort Worth, Texas, and we're having a lot of fun creating and helping to put out the needed infrastructure to support the electric vehicles around the world. We're excited about the products that we're making and manufacturing here locally. And we are now entering into the residential space. We have been in the B2B space for quite a while, so we're now entering into the residential space, and we're excited about bringing out a new product that we hope will benefit electric vehicle drivers for years to come. So kudos to us, and it was a long journey, but hey, we got there. So thank you for the invitation to share and to be on this panel today. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. And that's one of those big milestones that de-risk. So we'll be visiting that conversation when we get into the equity pathways. So Allison, Dr. Silveus, welcome.
Hi, I'm Allison Silveus. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm really excited about it. I'm the co-founder, majority owner of Unbent, and we are a start-to-finish hiring solution that's combining VR, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and social psychology to assess bias relative to skills in the hiring space.
So before we dive into kind of the non-dilutive side, I wanted to just give the audience a sample of what are all the funding sources that you've explored, just kind of the categories of funding places that you've explored. So Edward, what are all the ones that you have explored as far as funding into your venture?
Well, we've explored friends and family. We explored bank loans, grants. We've got a lot of grants, so free money. We've explored money through the angels, and that's about it at the moment. So loans, traditional loans, grants, angel funding, friends and family funding, and the use of our own funding. So bootstrapping.
Yeah. Blood, sweat, and tears.
That's right.
Did you do any competitions? I don't remember.
I did. I did do a couple of competitions. We were part of I think it was the Fort Worth
business plan competition.
Business plan competition, yes. We didn't win any money in that. We were close, but so yes, we participated in that, and then we were part of the another. It wasn't really a competition, but at least we got everything paid for, and that was Power Moves NOLA. So that kind of worked out and gave us some additional resources as well.
Nice. Well, we've got a treasure trove of pathways that you have explored that we'll dive into this discussion and all the lessons learned across that journey. And Allison, what about Unbent?
So founded actually in 2020. Sometimes I have to remind myself of that. So bootstrapping obviously is how I started. And about 6 months in, I think I would say, I submitted for a National Science Foundation pitch. Pitch got accepted. So while I was finalizing my last year of my doctorate and working full time, I had a team that was working on writing an SF grant. Network quality. So I hope y'all can hear me. In addition to that, recently we were contacted about a month ago by a venture group. So we've been in the due diligence process for about a month, and that is grueling. And then competition-wise, actually, we submitted to Y Combinator. I've been a little bit hesitant in terms of kind of pursuing it further or anything like that. We have a business strategist that's now on our team that's kind of handling our dilutive strategy. And then about a month ago, we were contacted by LG about our assessments, and they were asking us to apply for a $2 million competition that they were actually running. So we actually finalized that a few days ago.
Excellent. A whole other category of corporate innovation incentivizing innovations that they are interested in on some of the problems that they're facing. Yeah, the reverse pitch a little bit.
It's an interesting, you kind of have to, when you submit, you have to kind of listen to like what their needs are, and then does it align with your needs? And so one of the things is that they're very focused on joint development. And so they're looking for opportunities across the globe right now that they might not have even tapped into within the system, within their ecosystem. It was really cool.
Excellent. Well, I want to definitely dive into non-dilutive first. Both of y'all have explored this. Allison, you've just gone through it. So when we say non-dilutive, it is not taking equity to secure that capital. It comes in, and Edward said free money. There's lots of accounting that comes along with that, and the purposes of those dollars as they come in, and it's usually going to be kind of the restricted kind, like it's focused on one of those things. So one of the big ones, or the two big categories that are usually thrown out there in non-dilutive funding for tech companies, is the Small Business Innovation Research grants that are run through many federal programs, and the Small Business Tech Transfer grants that are run through a subset of those, but also the startup is coordinated with an institution, university, or other research institution to help drive that innovation to market. And so, Allison, you just mentioned the National Science Foundation, and was that SBIR application?
Yes, so it was an SBIR. One of the challenges is that I work at a university, so I kind of had to make that decision kind of first and foremost up front if I was going to do an SBIR at STTR. And the reason that that's important is because you have to know how your budget is going to kind of be allocated, because they're different depending on which strategy you go with. And then you also have to be kind of aware that if you do go with the STTR route, the tech transfer route, you have to be very clear in terms of your intellectual property, in terms of what you own, and then does the university actually have a policy on any new IP that comes out of that joint relationship? Is that going to be something that's co-owned? So because of kind of some of those determinants, we decided to actually go with the SBIR. And kind of built our budget around that. And I would say that from kind of pitch acceptance to getting the grant actually out the door, you're looking at about 6 months, just in writing and putting SOWs together and putting budgets together. So it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a full plan. I mean, it's not just like, oh, I can jump into that with 1 week's notice and submit on a deadline for it. Unless you're just not sleeping ever and you've got a team of 10 that are really working to develop that, that's a good expectation to set for founders as they explore this, is really go with that. So one of the things also is like access to the program directors. Did you reach out to anybody at NSF along that journey outside of the submission of the one kind of the pitch and getting them to say, yes, we want a full application? Did you ever talk to anybody at NSF prior to the full submission?
So it's a good question. I had experience working on an NSF grant before. So, I mean, I knew how tedious they were going into it because of the academic background that I had come from, which I think is obviously a knowledge gap in the startup space because it's kind of like that bias. Like we assume that all SBIR or STTR grants are only for academics, and they're not. And so when I decided to look at this, I kind of was just looking at focusing on, things that were equity free. And I knew National Science Foundation had some experience with it. And so when I found the American Seed Fund, I was like, okay, well, I'll do this. I think that we could have also looked at DoD, Department of Defense. I think we could have looked at National Institute of Health. I think that maybe even DoD probably would have been a good one for us because of I think there's 11 agencies total that actually do STTRs and SBIRs. The DoD gets about like half of that money. So NSF actually, most people don't know this, but NSF actually gets the smallest cut or piece of the pie for SBIRs and STTRs. And so when you're kind of like trying to decide like which ones you're wanting to do, you kind of have to kind of keep that in perspective.
Yeah, and so it's based on like fit of your tech and kind of what they're looking for.
Yeah, and the program director reached out to me, I would say, right after I submitted the pitch. They were talking to me constantly, but I never thought about reaching out to them ahead of time. Like I submitted the pitch, honestly thinking, like, what are the chances? Like we'll even have our pitch accepted. And then it did. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, the pitch got accepted. So maybe there's something there. And that's when I started kind of having those discussions with the program director explicitly. But again, kind of knowing the nuances of those rules and regulations, that discussion had to be passed over to our principal investigator because if you work a full-time job, you are not allowed to be the principal investigator on the SBIR grants. And so you have to kind of know that going in because you have to transfer over that communication with the program director to somebody you trust that's going to lead that as the PI.
Yeah, and it's an acronym that's always thrown around, the PI, Principal Investigator, as a real key one to know. And like the STTR, I think you were spot on, like the 11 agencies that run SBIR programs individually. And then I think there's only 5 or around that area that run the STTR program. So it does get a little bit more focused on that. And and so then the STTR has rules as far as how much you have to be covering the R&D and how much the institution has to be covering the R&D. It can't just be like outsourced to some other firm or contract research organization or anything like that. And so as anything with any funding, I think we would all share that you should do your due diligence about those funding sources and read the fine print.
And the IP, first and foremost, like no IP rules like up and down and sideways when you're working with any other entity because you want to protect it. It's what the startup technically has. Like that's the most valuable, precious thing at the very beginning.
Yes. Protect that as well and as strong as you protect your equity and the strategic uses of those pieces. So Edward, we revisit the SBIR, STTR, but you explored some grants of a different flavor. Walk us through what those look like.
Yeah, so we actually did get an NSF grant. I forgot about that, but that was a couple of years ago for customer discovery.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty cool. But we've had a lot of grants that we apply for. I mean, that we received. We've received probably about 5 grants over the last year that was non-dilutive. We didn't have to pay it back. And as a company, trying to get things moving to the right direction, that was super, super helpful. You know, I call it free money because it technically is. You know, obviously you know, you have to just answer some questions on how you spent it, but most importantly, it's a lot of it out there, a lot. You just got to apply for it. And what's interesting, you know, as we apply for it, it takes no more than like 30 minutes. Like you can run through multiple grant applications. They all ask just about the same information. And, you know, it's for me, it's like, you know, it's a numbers game, right? You know, you're not going to get them all, but if you got 100 and you apply for 100, you probably get 10, right? Maybe 5. But regardless, you know, those grants can run in the range of $5,000 upwards of $25,000. So it just depends on the grant. And so we were lucky to get a few of those, and you know, it was very very helpful, believe it or not. So and it really kind of adds to not being it really kind of help you so you don't have to go out early on and try to get additional funding from diluted type sources.
Yeah, and especially since it's so early, there's still so much risk in that venture. And you're spot on, like find and capitalize on all the opportunities that are presented to you as far as funding that can come in, and save all of those answers. Like put it in a document, save those answers and responses to questions. And whenever it's a repeat, you're able to do that. And if there's character limits, then you can tweak and everything like that. But I just love the fact that you're like, oh yeah, I forgot I got this funding from the National Science Foundation through the I-Corps program to do customer development. But that I would say that's probably the biggest indicator that you did the I-Corps Lite, not the full I-Corps, correct?
Actually, I did both. So I
You
got
did
two
both.
different.
That's right.
Yes, I did the I-Corps Lite first. So we got grant for it down in Austin. It was very, very exciting, actually. It really, you know, made you look at your business from a different perspective. So, and then after the I-Corps Light, we did the full NSF I-Corps, which was up in Detroit. So for 8 weeks. And so that itself was pretty interesting. It was, why I said it was interesting, it was almost like you're like a salesperson. You're just going around to different businesses and companies and people, and you know, help you, you know, kind of really look at your hypotheses and really, you know, kind of figure out, you know, who you thought was your customer is really your customer, right? Kind of make you, you know, take all of that and the business model canvas, and really hone those things in. And it's a very exciting program. I tell you, you know, what's interesting, you know, if you can, you should do it because it really makes you look at your business a different way than you did before.
Yeah, funding to
Plus, it's free.
yeah,
Technically.
it pays you to essentially do that work and validate your technology with that market and those customers. So I love that. There was another thing that you did in a program. I don't remember which department, but it paid for some of your travel to international markets.
Yeah, so actually we did a few of those programs. So there was a grant through the and I can't remember the name, but it's through the state of Texas, where it's geared for small businesses that want to do business internationally. Sorry about that. And so we were able to, and that grant covered up to, I think it was $15,000. Actually, we got it twice, and it allows you to travel. So it actually paid for us to travel. We went to many countries, talked to many people, to, you know, about our product, about, you know, bringing EV chargers to their country. We had opportunity, and then they not only that, but they pay for um, a translator. They pay for your hotel. I mean, it was awesome. Like, and then we got another grant from the state of Texas to kind of do a similar thing. So I think over the last couple of years, you know, we've gotten a few grants that have really helped us to expand our company. And those grants are like irreplaceable because not only did it give you the money, but it connected you with actual people that connected you with decision makers. So that was pretty awesome for, you know, that's what I call the top-notch grant, right? It's not just money, but it's money in action. That's how I like to look at it.
And they would fall in that category of people use that smart money. Like,
yes,
it brings more than just capital. It's so many layers of value on top of that. And it's great that the federal government is really helping companies think globally to get introductions into those marketplaces, and that you can really think of that. It's reducing your expenses to be able to accomplish those goals. So that is really funding for your venture to grow bigger than to what your goals are.
yeah. We would have never been able to do that at this stage of the game, on our own dime, because we prioritize really how our dollars are spent, and so it wouldn't have never been on international. That in itself is very expensive trips, and so those dollars were priceless, like literally priceless. And not just it didn't just pay for me; it paid for your team as well. So, that's what's awesome about it as well.
Yeah, that's very powerful. So entrepreneurs, take note of those and reach out to those sources and find out and discover those. But Allison, there was a recent one. Did you happen to apply to the Texas Women's Foundation Accelerate Her program and that grant program?
I did not actually. So I thought about it. When I looked at it, I think that there was one caveat. I think it was because you had to be a Texas based. So our company is obviously we're in Delaware. So I think that was one of my little, that's a fly in my ointment.
Yeah.
And it goes back to like reading and kind of knowing, like before you go into this, like, okay, like, do I hit each of these marks or whatever? And so, yeah, we're a Delaware Corp. And so no.
Yeah, that would be a limitation. The fine print really matters in those
Yes.
applications. You want to make sure that if I am applying, that I can really win and be awarded these dollars and not have a barrier on some illegal structure and everything. And so, from non-dilutive funding, it also includes like reward-based crowdfunding. So kind of the Kickstarter, Indiegogo. I go out to the market, I ask for people to put funds in, and they get a reward of a discount of the product or a t-shirt or a custom written thank you note for a $5 contribution. And I know I've participated and supported reward-based crowdfunding. Edward, that was something you explored as well, right?
I did explore that. I wasn't super successful in it. I think we were just really, really early when we did it, like really, really early from perspective just of a technology, the industry itself. So, but we did get some people that bought the product, and actually we got a few people that bought the product, and so that did help. That funding helps to um, you know so actually when we went through the process, we didn't meet the goal, so the people who bought it got their funds back. But what was interesting, after the uh, uh, project ended, then those people that actually went through the campaign actually came back to us directly. So I really call them our very, very early people that really took a chance on a product that they hadn't had in their hands. So we're excited about that. But yes, it's very interesting. There's a lot of success in it, especially if you have the right product for the right time. You can really kind of get off the ground with it. So we did explore it. I would say, honestly, for me, although we didn't reach the goal, it was still a success. And it was a success because it gave us an opportunity to get feedback from people that was interested in the product, and then it gave us an opportunity to kind of understand what the launch will look like, right? So kind of gave us all of those things that we can take back to say we will never do this again, or maybe we should do this better. So so we tried it. We failed miserably, but it was fun.
So Allison, you're now in the waiting game of the NSF application, right? You've got some time, but you're still waiting. So as you reflect back on just the journey so far, are there any other expectations and tips that you would pass on to other founders that are looking to pursue the SBIR pathway?
Don't do it when you're doing a doctorate, because it's really stressful. No, but in all sincerity, it is definitely worth it. I think that I probably it's like when you fail, or when you reflect or anything like that, you always look back at okay, what would change or whatever in the dynamic. And overall, I was actually really impressed with our team. And I think having a strong team behind you to really identify who's going to fit where. I think one of the things that I do recommend for anybody that's writing up a grant proposal is having a scope of work, that is with any consultants that you're working on, and getting an estimate of what their fees are going to be based on that year of work that you outline, just so you have some type of documentation. And then kind of identifying if you're going to have any vendors and things like that, and if that's going to adjust your budget. Those are pieces that I think I would have, ahead of time. And we did that. Things that I would have changed, and probably reflecting on the process, is I probably would have set up a corp sooner rather than later. And I say that only because when you go through the process and once your pitch is accepted, you have this clock that starts to get the grant out the door. And we didn't have a Duns and Bradstreet number. So we were still an LLC, so we had to basically dissolve that, form a corp, then change banks, then get the Duns. So all these things that were kind of little nuances that, kind of delayed things a little bit, by a month and a half. I probably would have done that before we had even pitched, just so it kind of sped up the process.
Yeah, it's an excellent tip. I mean, that happens with some angel funding as well. As we get into equity kind of pathways of funding, the legal formation of the company does matter to those sources. And so you will commonly see that of a conversion from an LLC to a C corporation, which is much easier than a C corporation to an LLC. Let's make sure that we note that. But legal support along these journeys are really important. So we'll revisit kind of overall tips at the end, but I want to move into kind of the equity side of things. Not that we're promoting giveaway equity. There's definitely a strategy to this, and there's also the ability of saying no. Allison, you just said you're going through the substantial process of due diligence with a potential equity investor into the company. And so not only did we talk about doing our own due diligence with funding sources, you're in the thick of it in the due diligence process with one equity investor. And so what's that process look like so far?
It's, I think a good friend, Bruce Raven, put it as it's like dating, but it's like dating that goes on and on and on. At least it feels like that. And then it gets kind of like you start exposing yourself more upfront, as more dates occur. And you're like, oh, well, this is what our finances look like. This is what the IP looks like. And power of attorney, who would have thought, right? These are things that start coming up. So I think that that's one of those things where one of the things that I've kind of done through this process is I've included my team as much as I possibly can in every meeting that we actually have, because I don't want it to come across like this is just a me decision. I want it to kind of feel like everybody has some level of decision making in what we decide to do in terms of if it's a right fit or not. I think that right now, especially with what you were kind of speaking to, identifying that right fit. I think it's not just about, somebody comes in and they're wanting, a little bit of equity and they're going to offer an amount of funding. I think it's also about can you actually work with these people? And what type of relationship are you wanting fundamentally with the VC or the angel that you're working with? And if it doesn't feel right, I think feeling comfortable with walking away is probably one of the best things that you can possibly do. Even if you don't like at that moment have anything else on the table, it's okay to walk away, because you can always kind of look somewhere else. But going into a bad relationship, I think, with an angel or a VC, I think can just end drastically for everyone. And so we've kind of been, we started slow in the process, and then it just became multiple meetings every week. And right now I'm actually kind of in thought mode where I'm like, do I want to? And what's it going to cost me? And I mean, I know what it's going to cost me, but am I willing to take that? So, and honestly, it was kind of one of those things where LG kind of came into play at the same time. And then it's like, well, now things have changed my landscape. So
when you have something of value, it definitely presents many suitors.
Yes. And so I don't know. I'm listening to my team as much as I possibly can, and trying to make a sound decision, I think, that will benefit everybody.
And so the question was,
what was it like saying no to equity money?
It was honestly, it was tough, because we got, I got offered investment like really, really, really early before we even had a product. Just kind of was an idea. I didn't really understand it much as far as how it worked. It wasn't until I, joined TechFW, and I remember talking with Darlene Boudreaux, who kind of hammered it into my head like every single time about giving up equity too early. Even understanding, how big 1% could potentially be down the line, right? And so for me, I always had to go down with bootstrap as long as I could. So I bootstrapped the company for like the first 4 years with my own money. And so when I did take the funding, or it was strategic. We needed that funding to kind of keep to get through the next hurdle. So we wanted to only take what we needed at that time and not, try to ask for more. And that's kind of been our approach. So, but yeah, it's tough saying no because you really want to take it, right? Because it can help you move faster. For me, I always kind of knew when I started the company, because I bootstrapped, I would move a little slower than maybe other companies that did take a huge amount of investment up front. So I understood that. I embraced that. Probably looking back on it now, I probably would have taken the money. But I don't think, I think honestly, to be very honestly and transparent, I think that doing it the way I did it was good for me at the time and good for the company. And I still feel good about that right now. Now we're at the point where, taking some additional investment on may be very important to us. But we're still kind of, going through that and understanding what that will look like.
Yeah, being very strategic, thoughtful, and understanding what that means to the company in the long term, which brings up a few things. So I wanted to do a quick definition for everybody that's listening in. Allison, you mentioned angels and VCs, venture capitalists. So the best way to think about this is angels are investing their own money, their personal funds, into early stage ventures that are high risk, high reward type of thing. And although some will have various milestones they want to see you reaching to de-risk this, that's all about finding out their sweet spot of those angels and what kind of companies they're interested in, how much they play to their experience and expertise, and how much they diversify their portfolio, how big they're building their portfolio of companies. Many would look at 10 to 20 companies that they're building into a portfolio, and they may do this in a family trust. So you hear the title of family offices that are kind of investing their money in that way too, kind of falling into the super angel kind of category as far as check sizes. But you could see angels with $10,000 minimum check sizes and those going up to 100,000 or greater. And so you as an entrepreneur have the ability to set a minimum with those angels, but you as the angels will have their own minimum too. And so angels that are investing and say you come in with a 50,000 minimum, they say, well, I'm going to need to form what is called a special purpose vehicle and form an LLC that will collect multiple angels dollars to hit that minimum and invest. And it also leads me to this tool that both of you have to navigate, and some of the strategy along this is your cap table, your capitalization table, and where all that equity, the shares, and how that's distributed, the option pool. It's a whole whirlwind of stuff. We do not have enough time to even take a full tour of the cap table, so I recommend everybody to check out webinars on that subject, and tools like Carta is a big name in that space, and there's more tools out there to help manage the cap table. But it really tells the story of who is invested, at what levels, at what terms, and it gives you an opportunity to map out what happens if I raise X amount on X pre-money valuation, and how does that, another term that's commonly used, dilute those that have already invested. Dilution is a key thing that many are going to be looking at, and not just like as Edward said, like the friends and family round, into the seed round, into a Series A round of capital raising. Those that invest earlier at the higher risk get some nice terms. They then will look at following on and investing in follow on to keep that position on the cap table to not get diluted too much or protect against dilution on that. And so it's a whole world of language, terminology, and all of this for it. But navigating this is also like with venture capitalists, they are investing a collection of people's money. It's not necessarily their money. They're betting on ventures at a certain stage of development, and many won't invest as early as the angels will. It's kind of a handoff. There's also a valley of issue of angel to VC funding and getting that super angel to kind of bridge up to clear that valley. But Edward, you have definitely worked with angel investors on some of that early stage funding, past the friends and family and past the grants. What has it been like, and what kind of information would you share with other founders on expectations of working with angel investors that are investing their own personal funds?
Yeah, I think, you made a good point. Every angel investor is different. They all come with their unique set of things that they bring to the table, whether it's, angel investors that, kind of love your story, love what you're doing, kind of buying in on you to help lead those rounds, or whether it's angel investors that just think it makes sense. I think for us, when we were going through some of the key points for us, again, we were really early. It was a industry that was early. And so when we first approached the angel investors, I think this was a couple of years back, there were some things they wanted to see get done from a company perspective. Not necessarily, we were already a corporation, so that wasn't an issue. It was more about some of the milestones. And then, I think when we first approached them, the timing just wasn't right. The second time we approached them, we had some of the angel investors that really believed in us, kind of helped to lead those efforts through the channels of, bringing what we do to some of the other angels. I think we were far along, so that helped. We had a really good strategy. The market viability is really good. And then, we were playing the industry that was growing. So that kind of helped the case as well. But most importantly, I think people have to like you first. That's kind of, I think, is one of the most important things. People have to believe in you as the founder, that you can actually do what you say you're going to do. And then I think the third thing was that they have to have a level of that they're really going to get their money back. And so, I think, I always say I'm an approachable person. I try to value everyone's feedback, and so, when I approached the Angels the second time, I think I was ready. I kind of knew what they were looking for, and I think the product and our company had got to a point where they could see that it was time for this investment of money to help us get to that next phase. So, being honest, being open, being yourself, really sharing have a really good vision about what your company is doing and how you're going to get there is very, very key. And I think that's what kind of helped us get over the hump that second time.
Absolutely. And so many of them will comment on, I want to bet on the jockey, the founder, the team that are driving this vision, not the horse. And there's actually a local investor that I have a ton of respect for, and he communicates this to others. And he's like, if I don't believe, or if I have questions that the founder should be doing something different, that they've got a great solution, no, but they should be doing it a different way or getting to the market a different way. If I don't believe in their vision, I'm not the investor for them. I need to invest in the ones that I believe in and believe in the plan that they have put together today, because that's going to just be so much stronger in the alignment with this, because it's, I mean, as Allison pointed out, it's dating, it's getting to know each other, and it's people investing in people that, yes, they want to get a return on that investment and want to know what those comparables are from that market and what the timeline and multiple could be and the potential internal rate of return. And we're just snowballing into all of these terms that we encourage. One resource for everybody listening that's like, I don't know any of this, is to check out the Angel Capital Association, angelcapitalassociation.com. It's got resources for both new investors and entrepreneurs. I encourage entrepreneurs to read both categories, learn what the investors are being educated on as much as what the investors are telling the entrepreneurs to be educated on. Speak both sides of that equation in that relationship, and know what that looks like. Edward, you shared a bunch of great insights around this and kind of the expectations on it. And so, no, thank you. Those are excellent, because some of the stuff that you're pointing to, like the milestones, it's this de-risking, and you just reached those big milestones of UL certification for your residential unit.
Right.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that was a very huge milestone. Obviously, we wanted to hit it earlier, and obviously that's a whole different, certification in itself is a whole different challenge. But yes, those one of the milestones that were set for potential follow-on investment, when that time comes. And so, but at the same time, I think it's good as well, because what it shows is there's a trust factor on both sides. Obviously, anytime you get in the bed with anyone, you want to make sure that you trust them and they trust you, right? Because there is money being exchanged, and the last thing you ever want to do is have angry investors or angry entrepreneurs, founders at the investors. So, and then the other thing for me is and one of the things that I think really helped me too is when we first took on the investment dollars from, for example, the angels. I was able to meet with them a lot. I had lunch with a few of the angels. I could pick up the phone and call them. Even the investors that was not angels that invested into my company, my friends, I was able to, pick up the phone with them. They were very encouraging. Wasn't a lot of pressure. So I think all of that stuff helps in the long scheme, in the big scheme of things. So.
Well, and that's something that both of y'all are looking at, is the communication plan to keep those that are in support of you engaged and in the know, because you don't want it to fall into of like, oh, I invested in you and I only hear from you when you need money.
Right.
That's not the reputation that you want with them. And so I know both of y'all prep kind of summary update emails that are sent out to supporters, not just those that give capital, but those that are just big supporters of the companies. What does that rhythm look like, and what do you try to include in those? So Allison, I know you've been working on one recently and getting it out, and so what do you try to include in those concise updates to those key supporters of the company?
So for us, I try to use bullets. People don't like to read big, long paragraphs. That's just not our community today. So using bullets, trying to balance the company efforts with also employee or other founder efforts, like in terms of highlights that they might actually have, contributed towards the company in some sort. Or even a publication that they might have had, like Dr. Johannes de la Fuente She and I had a publication actually on intersectionality and race. And so like things like that were included as well because she's part of our team. And so including those in bullets and then, you know, having some nice imagery and flow to the document, but keeping it concise enough so that people can read it and glance and go, oh, okay, so this is where they are right at this moment or whatever it might be. And then, you know, so they can kind of like move on and know that you just haven't stopped thinking about them. You still love them and you're not asking anything of them.
Do you include any small asks, like maybe, hey, I'm looking for an introduction into somebody that has this skill set or in this place to see if you can tap into network connections?
So I would say yes, and I think in the last 2 to 3 months, I would say, you know, we brought on somebody obviously that has the business expertise. I'm a science tech nerd. And I would say she's the yin to my yang. And so that changed a little bit of like how we kind of strategize in terms of who's talking to who. And so we kind of made this nice like delineation if there was anything that was going to be like technical or you know, talking engagements, those kinds of things. And then non-dilutive pursuits, like I would go ahead and take over those discussions. And then dilutive, this individual would actually take over. Psalm, by the way, is her name. So she's actually handling our operations. And so that was just kind of one of those things where I know that, you know, you're not supposed to be everything and every role to everybody. And so you need to kind of start building out your team thinking about those things in mind when you're having those discussions with investors and whatnot. But having said that, I did get caught actually in a VC moment about a couple weeks ago where I actually did have to speak on the business side. So do not let your guard down in terms of thinking, well, like I'm off the hook and I don't ever have to know it, because you will have to know it.
Boom. That is excellent tips, because you before you get engaged with any capital sources, especially equity-based ones, you can't have just like big gigantic gaps. You got to be prepared to have a conversation about anything and everything. And you can't always be like, oh, well, that's that team member. That's their whole space. I don't know anything about that conversation. You got to know the ins and outs and the surface level to be able to do that. And then quickly say, I want to bring in my CTO so they can help answer the depths on the technical aspects, or the CMO or whoever on your team to play to your strengths. But that's a nice division, because Edward, you've been in the hot seat in due diligence and having those conversations, and you're like, I've got to answer every question that they're right. Sending to me.
Yeah. You know, for us, I try to update the investors when there's a change, right? Like, because I value their time, and I know they're super busy people, especially like, you know, angels, you know, they could be running companies themselves. And so my goal is to send out like a quarterly update, unless something shorter, you know, makes you do that, like, you know, giving a monthly or something. But for us, since we were kind of working through our milestones, my goal was to send them something when there's a change, something that was worthwhile talking about, right? And not just send them something that is kind of piggybacking off the last thing I sent them, right? And But what I do try to include is like KPIs. I try to include graphs of revenue generation, you know, sales volume. I try to include some of the hot targets that we're, you know, kind of actively involved in, what's in the funnel, what that looks like as far as potential revenue. If I've also sent, you know, in some of my updates, hey, we're looking for these type of folks, or, you know, we're looking for anyone in this space. Those asks, you know, that may help us to land another client that we're trying to get to, or another customer. So yes, I try to include things that, you know, that will give them the bigger picture of kind of where we are and what we're doing while we're trying to, you know, make our way through these milestones. So they, you know, they'll kind of understand that we're not just sitting around doing anything, but we are actually doing some things. and we are actually still moving forward. It's just, here are the roadblocks. I even put that in there. Hey, these are the roadblocks. I try to include sometimes if it's important. These are some of the things on the roadmap that we would like to hit in the next 60, 90, or 6 months or 1 year. Those are some of the things that I think are very important for investors to really understand, kind of get the pulse of your company and where you are and where you're going, so they don't think their money is just sitting in an abyss or in a dark black hole that they're never going to get it back.
Excellent. So glad that you brought up the key performing indicators and showing what you're measuring and why that matters, and the story that it's leading towards to the growth of the company and that trend, and the roadblocks is a great thing to communicate, because maybe they can sit there and say, I can help Edward on that roadblock. I have got either in my own wheelhouse as far as my experience, or somebody that's close to me that can help navigate that roadblock and how to work through it, whether you control it or it's outside of your control of your company on the things that will limit the growth and scaling.
Yes.
Excellent tips. So we've got a couple of minutes remaining. I know there's a whole other, topic of just coverage in this equity conversation of just like understanding term sheets and the terms associated with that. And I'd recommend to the audience, check out the National Venture Capital Association. They have sample documents on there that are kind of templates, that are term sheets and stuff like that, to kind of just get a lay of the land of those terms that what people will be looking at. Information rights, non-dilutive clauses, sunshine clauses. There's a bunch in there, but there's a lot of resources like the book Venture Deals to kind of learn about this stuff. What are some, so I want to wrap up with like 2 questions. One being, what's the knowledge that you would pass on to yourself or wish you had when you first started around funding that you maybe still don't have right now, or anything like that? So what do you wish you knew when you first started that you would share with others? And then what resources do you think are most beneficial to founders to plug into on their journey as they look for funding?
I think for me, in the beginning, I think, and I think every founder probably, have a challenge with this. You really don't know, right, like really what you really need, right? And so sometimes you don't ask for enough, and there may be times that you're asking for too much, right? So I think for me it would be, really understanding what does evaluation really means, right? Like how do I really know? Because you can be in a position, and this happened to me when we first got offered some funding, right? As I look back now, when we first got offered some funding, they were asking for like restricted stocks, right? And had I agreed to that, it just didn't sound right to me when I heard it, because restricted means you can't give it away, you can't do without it, or you can't, you gotta keep it, right? So I was like, that doesn't sound right. So, but I didn't know enough about it, but I just knew that didn't sound right. So I think for me, early on is maybe more in-depth knowledge of fundraising, not necessarily how much to give or get, but more of how does it all work, right? To really determine my value. And I still don't know. I kind of probably know 80% more than I knew then, but there's still times I have to run to Darlene, right, to say, am I doing this right, or is this wrong? And then she, of course, puts you back in your place as usual. So that's kind of my deal.
I think Allison's had some of those visits to Darlene to navigate.
Yes, I have. Yes, several. Oh, yes. I think to Edward's point, so early on, I didn't know, and I think I'm still honestly learning, obviously, but especially coming from my background, in that science, like tech space, I think that we are so siloed that we don't know. We don't know, right? We don't know about the funding strategies. We're trained explicitly in academia to do grants and stuff, so that's not like like a bias for us, like we can do it. But in terms of knowing those terms and things like that, it's something we don't know. And I think one of the things that I remember kind of going through the process is as I was building out like the team, you know, I had somebody at the time that was like speaking on our behalf and was like, oh yes, and we're going to do an individual convertible note, meaning between these people, our team people. And ironically, I was actually at Global Entrepreneurship Week and I met our attorney, and he was like, you never, ever do convertible notes with like the person. It's always with the company. And so I was like, woo, I need education on this. So I was about to lose everything, right? Like just because I didn't know. And so I'm happy that I had gone to Global Entrepreneurship Week. I'm happy that I had educated myself on that I had listened to a very smart attorney, thank you, Andrew, and known to never agree to something without really doing your own research on it. So take time to like go, okay, this sounds like a great deal, but let me also, you know, run it by my advisors at Tech Fort Worth or whatever it might be and ask them what their thoughts are. And so what that incident taught me was actually, ironically, it led into team like formation, which was that I needed to have like a process until my own process for hiring was in place that could help kind of filter out like the bad apples from the good. And so I think I put Psalm through so many darn interviews with people. You know, she was probably like, geez. But I needed that in order to make sure that I was making a good decision, because I didn't want that to happen. Like, again, I needed somebody that was on our team that had the same vision as me. So, yeah.
Excellent tips. I love the idea. It could be like asking questions doesn't mean you're dumb. It means it shows humility, that I know that I need to continue to learn. And I always communicate, like, entrepreneurs are lifetime learners, always looking to absorb something new. And so my hope is that those listening to this are going to have a spark of information that sets them on a journey to be better equipped for raising capital. But final question and quick mentions, any resources that you recommend to other founders to say, hey, go check out this book, this podcast, this voice?
You know, I read, I've actually read it twice, but the 360 Leader book is a very good book to, you know, show you how to deal with people, right? How to lead. You know, sometimes we're out there running like a chicken with our head cut off, but we don't understand the importance of leading the team and getting everybody on the same page to help your company move forward. So that's my good resource outside of all of my mentors that, you know, that I leverage at Tech Fort Worth and around the US, because there's many mentors I have outside of the Tech Fort Worth Accelerator that I leverage for, you know, conversations, answers, guidance, and leadership, including my wife, believe it or not. So
excellent. That's huge. And Allison?
Other than Tech Fort Worth, obviously. So F6S is one that's actually how LG contacted me. So I would say take the pain and go ahead and set up a like company profile. It'll help you in the long run because you never know who's going to contact you. I think one of the things that I noticed a few founders were not aware of was Crunchbase. So it's important to set up a Crunchbase account, even if you're a startup, and then maintain it so that you have like updates on it and understand like what the numbers mean.
Thank you to the Center for Entrepreneurship and Economic Innovation and to UTA for having us for Global Entrepreneurship Week in Fort Worth, and to Dell Technologies for support in GEW Fort Worth. So thank you and enjoy the events this week.
thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.